student's SAT score. If one of our admission officers came into the committee and said, oh, look, we need to admit her because look at these test scores, we kind of assign that person to do something else. That's not how we think about it. So my advice is this. Take the ACT once, take the SAT once. After you get the results back, if it's possible to like one better than another, then take that one again and just be done with it. So from our mind, it doesn't matter. Either way, ACT, SAT.
Research shows that after 2 test sittings, any possible gain is minimal.
I'm interested at the test scores on the other end. I work in a school on campus that does our own admissions, and there are no scores high enough that you can guarantee admissions, but they're scored low enough. But I just know, not ever going to happen. I'm pretty sure it's not. And I'm finding it harder as I look at colleges. My son's a sophomore, I'm just getting started, have a sense about that. And so I look at your quartile SATs, and I probably get a sense about where the not happening is. So I don't look at the GPAs. One of your slides actually had 4.05 as the average GPA. I'm assuming that's taking account of inflation for honors classes.
There's 2 ways to measure.
I understand that. So then this 3.8 must mean that a large number of your students are having high grades in honors classes. And if you just said to yourself, well, if my kid has a 3.8, that's probably about average, it might be quite misleading in thinking in those terms.
Absolutely.
Any help on that?
Yeah, these numbers, every number, whether it's USC or any institution, needs to be taken in context. And that is going back to one of the things I said at the start. There's an understanding among colleges that not everyone has a choice of where they go to school. And I will tell you that when I go and speak with private schools especially, and I hear this all the time, I speak in a lot of private schools, it's always, oh, excuse me, Dean, do you know that our school, you know, is better than that one you visited last week? Sure, of course we do. But the point I'm making is colleges will certainly take into account the context of the earning of that GPA, both the pattern of coursework and where those courses were taken. Grade inflation is a true problem in American secondary education. When we were all in high school, if you went to high school in the United States and you took a distribution of GPAs in high school, it would be a normal distribution. There were more C averages than B averages than A averages. Today, if you did the same distribution, there would be more A averages than B averages than C averages, which is what's led to some of the reliance on test scores. Now, all that being said, we also know something. The challenge with standardized test scores right now, the SAT and the ACT I'm speaking about, is that they are tests that don't tend to give false positives, but they can give false negatives, meaning if you get a 2350 on the SAT, you didn't get that by going C, 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 you didn't get it by guessing. You are probably a student who has the right sort of preparation to succeed in most colleges. However, on the converse, if you're someone who gets a 1500 on the 2400 SAT, which is the national average, 1512 is actually about the national average, I think, it is actually less predictive. The lower the test score, the less predictive it is. And we know at USC, the best combination of factors, quantitative factors, high school GPA and test score, will only predict 62% of the cases. So I'm saying all this in a way to simply say, is there a minimum? There is no stated minimum. Yes, of course, in any set, you're going to find a score at which no one lower was admitted. But at the end of the day, what we're thinking more about is not so much where is that line and who's at the minimum, but is this particular student, based on everything we know about her, do we think this is a bet worth taking? And that's all any college is trying to do. Are we setting this student up for success, or for a good shot at success? Now, the problem with standardized test scores is they're easy to quote, they're easy to track. There are many people on our faculty who I've had discussions with who clearly don't understand what these particular tests are supposed to be measuring. It's our job to think about that. So I don't know if that gets you any closer, but I just want to reassure you that we, and I can tell you just about any selective college or university, thinking about this in the ways that I just spoke about.
I might add that I think you can trust yourself more than you're allowing perhaps yourself to do. You know your son is doing his best. And I think that takes a lot of paying attention, a lot of listening. If he's doing his best and pushing himself, then it'll all kind of sort itself out. And you can certainly share these numbers, but sometimes they'll cause a student to crack. Maybe they can't reach that level. But you know, statistics, half of the students are above that median, or half are below that median. So do their best, encourage them, show that you're happy with what they're doing, and show them they can do better by working harder. We all have to learn that lesson in some way. In school, that's a great way to start. And this stuff kind of sorts itself out.
Online classes, do they help or hurt? So, taking them in conjunction to, stack their odds. So like my son had 2 band classes, sports, and so he has 4 academic classes. So he's been doing online classes to take, some of the prerequisites or the core classes.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to look at every course pattern, and we're going to look closely, where were the online courses taken, what were the online courses. There isn't a specific policy or practice that we have that says, oh, okay, if it's this online course, it's good. If it's this one, it isn't. We're going to be factoring that in, and we're going to be understanding, okay, what has he been doing in his traditional educational environment? Why has he supplemented this? And this actually brings up a point I want to make. One of the best things that your sons and daughters can do on their college application or in their college application is always seek to answer the question why. Because if there's ever anything in your son's or daughter's background or application or anything that one might think would raise a question, it's always good to explain why. Maybe that doesn't have to be in the essay, okay? But the Common Application and other schools' applications have places where students can basically write us something. So in your son's case, I'd be interested to understand, hey, tell us a little bit about the motivation for taking these courses. What have you gotten out of them? Does it help or does it hurt? Again, I think anything that's academic certainly is a benefit. But again, if there's something that isn't traditional or is less commonly seen, it's always good to find out more about that. This is also where the high school counselor can help us. And high school counselors, in the information they're asked to provide, actually are sort of prompted about things like this to help them, help us understand a little bit better why students have done what they've done.
I've been heard 2 different stories about attention deficit, whether you should divulge or whether you should keep it quiet.
When there are learning differences by law, colleges can't demand that it be basically disclosed. In our experience, we recommend that students disclose it if they feel that difference that they've had is something that, I don't want to say defines them, but is a very real challenge that they face. Colleges are not, we do not discriminate against students in that regard. And in fact, I've never sort of seen a situation where it would be to the student's disadvantage. Quite honestly, sometimes those sorts of learning differences can help us understand much better about why this pattern of performance is the way that it is. Then what colleges can do is they can assess what they have available to them to know if this student is going to fit into that. And I'm pleased to say at USC, in recent years, especially with the Korczak Center, for example, there have been a lot of successful students who've come to the university who've had some learning differences, whether it's ADHD, whether it's dyslexia, whether it's a whole range of differences, who've done quite well, and the university can support them. I would be surprised if I heard too many colleges give you different advice, but I think it's a reasonable question worth asking every college. With us here, I say, hey, if you feel comfortable disclosing it, disclose it. It's not going to be a black mark. It's not going to be held against the student. But again, no one can sort of force a student to say that. So if they don't want to disclose that. The other challenge, though, I would tell you, quite honestly, a lot of times, and it's not a problem, but it's an interesting fact, the student doesn't disclose it, but we might see a reference to it in a counselor letter. And again, that doesn't cause us alarm. It's just simply to say,